The scream that broke the silence, the jungle was quiet. Too quiet. Jake, a human explorer, moved slowly through the thick green vines. He had been walking alone for hours, deep inside the alien jungle on the planet Viron 6. The heat pressed down on his skin. Sweat rolled down his face. Insects buzzed around his head, but he didn't stop. He was here to collect rare plant samples for a research team back on Earth. But something didn't feel right today. The birds weren't singing. The trees weren't moving. Even the wind had stopped blowing. Jake stood still and looked around. Then, a scream, sharp, high, painful. Jake froze. It was not a sound he had ever heard before. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't like anything from Earth. It was more human, but not quite. The scream came again, weaker this time. Jake turned his head, listening carefully. It came from the east, past a line of thick red-leaf trees. Someone was in trouble. Jake dropped his backpack and started running. He pushed branches aside. Thorns scratched his arms. He leaped over roots and rocks, heart beating fast. Another scream, even softer. He was getting closer. Finally, he stopped at the edge of a clearing. What he saw made his breath catch in his chest. There, caught in a cruel metal trap, was a young alien woman. She was lying on her side, her leg twisted inside a sharp, mechanical clamp. Strange green blood ran from the wound. Her skin shimmered softly, blue, purple, and silver tones under the sunlight. Her eyes were wide, full of fear. Her body was shaking. Jake stepped forward slowly. "It's okay," he said gently. "I'm not here to hurt you." She gasped and tried to crawl back, but the trap held her leg tight. She couldn't move. Her fingers dug into the dirt. She looked around like she was expecting someone else, someone dangerous. Jake held up both hands. "It's all right. I'm human. You're safe." She didn't understand his words, but she stared at his eyes. Jake kneeled down near her, keeping his movements slow and calm. He looked at the trap. It was a hunter's snare, old, rusty, and meant to catch something big. Not for animals, for people. "Who did this to you?" Jake whispered, mostly to himself. He pulled a small tool from his belt. It sparked softly. He worked on the lock, but it was hard. The trap was alien-made, not standard tech. The girl flinched at every sound. "You're gonna be okay," Jake said again, voice calm. Click. The trap snapped open. The girl gasped, grabbed her leg, and tried to crawl away, but her body gave up. She collapsed again, breathing fast. Jake tore some cloth from his shirt and wrapped it around her bleeding leg. She watched him, confused, not speaking, not trusting, but not running. Jake reached into his pouch and took out a water bottle. He held it up. "Drink," he said, taking a small sip first to show it was safe. She stared at him, then slowly, carefully, she drank. For a moment, the jungle was quiet again, but not peaceful. Jake looked around. Something was wrong. The trap was new. Someone set it not long ago. Someone might still be near. He stood and scanned the trees. Nothing moved, but Jake's instinct screamed danger. He looked back down at the alien girl. Her eyes were half closed now. She was weak, maybe from blood loss or hunger. "We can't stay here," Jake said softly. She didn't reply. She couldn't. Jake carefully lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected. She winced in pain, but didn't fight. As he walked back into the trees, he didn't see the dark shadow high above them, watching from the branches. Something, or someone, had noticed. Tangled in thorns and chains, Jake moved carefully through the jungle, holding the alien woman in his arms. Her skin was cool against his, and her breathing was faint. Every few steps she gave a soft sound of pain, but she didn't resist. Her blood, green and glowing, left small drops on the leaves behind them. He didn't know her name. She hadn't said a word. But Jake knew one thing: whoever set that trap was dangerous, and they might still be nearby. Thick vines blocked the narrow path ahead. Jake used his blade to cut through them. The plants in this part of the jungle were strange. Some had small eyes that blinked. Others hissed when touched. It felt like the jungle was watching. He found a large fallen tree and gently laid the alien girl on the mossy bark. Her eyes opened for a second, then closed again. She was still bleeding, but at least she was safe. For now. Jake quickly set up a small protective field from his gear. It wouldn't last long, but it might keep predators away for a while. He crouched beside her and checked her wound again. This metal trap had cut deep. Her leg was swelling. Infection could come fast, especially in this jungle. "I need to clean this," Jake said, even though she couldn't understand him. He used clean water to rinse the wound and crushed a healing leaf he had collected earlier. As he pressed the leaf on her leg, her eyes opened, and she hissed in pain, grabbing his wrist. Her grip was weak, but her eyes were strong, filled with fear. Jake didn't pull away. "I'm helping you. See?" He gently pressed her hand against his chest. "Safe." She stared at him. Then slowly, she let go. Suddenly, a sound. Crack. Jake spun around, knife in hand, but it wasn't footsteps. It was the tree. He looked up and saw a strange vine above them slowly moving on its own. It was dropping something. A piece of bone. Jake's heart stopped. That wasn't a vine. It was a trap string. He turned back to the girl, but something was wrong. Her eyes were wide. She was looking at her own body. Jake followed her gaze. Thin metal chains, almost invisible, were looped around her wrists and waist. They had blended into the moss and dirt, and they were tightening. "No!" Jake shouted, cutting one quickly. The moment he did, another chain from the side snapped forward like a snake and wrapped around his arm. He dropped his knife. More chains came from the trees, snapping like whips. One brushed his face and cut his cheek. Jake grabbed the alien woman and rolled off the log just in time. The mossy tree exploded with sharp spikes from inside. It wasn't a tree. It was a trap nest designed to capture and kill anything that touched it. They landed hard on the dirt. Jake groaned and pulled the girl close. She was trembling, but alive. The jungle was full of traps, and these were made for her. Jake looked around. Someone had placed chains, wires, and hidden snares all around the area. It wasn't natural. This was hunting, not survival. He now understood. She wasn't just a victim. She was prey. Jake picked up his knife and carefully carried her away. From the trap nest, they moved slower this time, checking every step. "Who's doing this to you?" he whispered. "And why?" She didn't answer, but after a few moments, she raised one shaky hand and pointed. "North." Jake frowned. That's where the scream came from. He realized something. She hadn't been running from the trap. She had been running from something else, and fell into the trap while escaping. I nodded. "All right, I'll take you somewhere safe. Then we'll figure it out." But as he turned, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. On the ground were giant claw marks, fresh ones, not from any trap, from something alive. Trust of the hunted. The night in the jungle was not silent anymore. Every shadow seemed to move. Every sound felt closer than it should be. Jake sat beside a small fire he had made using a few dry leaves and a piece of heat stone from his gear. It gave off a soft glow, just enough to keep small creatures away, but not enough to be seen from far. The alien girl lay beside him, her legs still wrapped in cloth. Her face was pale, her lips dry, and her eyes, though closed, moved under the lids. She was dreaming, or remembering. Maybe both. Jake's knife was in his hand, ready. He had moved them to a rocky alcove on higher ground, surrounded by thick roots and stones. It wasn't perfect, but it gave them some cover, from the jungle, from whatever or whoever was hunting her. Jake didn't know much about aliens. He had worked on other planets, met peaceful species, even traded with some. But this girl, she was different. Not just her looks, though she was beautiful in an alien way with her glowing skin and long silver hair. But the way she moved, the way she stared, the way she feared everything. She didn't act like a soldier or a criminal. She acted like someone who had been chased for a long time. "Why you?" Jake whispered. "What did you do?" He didn't expect an answer. But then, her lips moved. "They want me. Gone." Jake leaned in. "You can speak?" She nodded slowly, eyes still closed. "They hunt. Not just me. My kind. All of us." Jake looked around the jungle. "Who are they?" The girl opened her eyes slightly. "Hunters. Not from sky. From Earth. From this jungle." Jake's brow tightened. "Locals?" She didn't answer. Her breathing was shallow. Jake handed her more water. She drank, then coughed weakly. "My name is Jake," he said softly. "I'm human. I don't know who you are, but I want to help." She looked at him. Then slowly, painfully, she said, "I am Layeka." "Okay, Layeka." Jake nodded. "We'll get out of here. Together." But Layeka shook her head. "You will die. If you stay. They don't stop." Jake gave a small smile. "I've faced worse." Suddenly, Layeka's eyes widened. She pointed to the edge of the clearing. "Move!" Jake rolled just in time as a thin arrow sliced past his shoulder, so fast it burned the skin. He looked up. In the trees, something moved. Not human, not animal. Something, tall, silent, wrapped in leaves and bones, watching. Jake pulled Layeka behind a rock and grabbed his blaster. He fired once, bright light lighting the dark trees. But the figure was gone. "Damn it," Jake whispered. "They found us." Layeka looked at him with shaking hands. "You should have left me." Jake stared at her. "I don't leave people behind." Suddenly, she crawled closer, her hand trembling. She pressed 2 fingers to his forehead. Her touch was cold. A soft glow passed from her hand to his skin. Jake felt warmth, then a strange calmness in his chest. "What did you—" "I see your heart," Layeka whispered. "You are not like them." She leaned back against the rock, her voice weaker now. "I was the last of my group. They hunted us. We ran. One by one. We fell. I was the only one who escaped." Jake looked into the jungle. The silence had returned, but not the safe kind. They were being watched. "You're not alone anymore," Jake said. "Let them come." Layeka's eyes were wet now. For the first time, she didn't look like prey. She looked like someone who had just seen hope. Footprints in the mud. The rain started just before sunrise. Cold drops slipped through the thick jungle leaves, soaking Jake's shirt and dripping onto Layeka's pale face. She didn't flinch. She was still asleep, her body weak and motionless. But her fingers, curled around a rock, kept twitching, like she was fighting in her dreams. Jake stood at the edge of their small shelter, scanning the ground. Something had changed. The silence wasn't just silence anymore. It was hiding something, something big. He took a slow step forward. The wet mud beneath his boots squished softly. As he moved past a thick fern, he saw them. Footprints. Not his. Not Layeka's. These prints were wide, with clawed toes, 3-pronged, each the size of a human head. And there wasn't just one trail. There were many. Jake crouched down. The rain hadn't washed them away yet. That meant they were fresh, hours old, maybe less. "They were here," he muttered. He followed the prints slowly, staying low. They weaved through the trees around thick trunks, past patches of mushrooms that glowed faint blue in the dark. Then he saw it, a spike driven into a tree, with a fresh strip of Layeka's blood smeared on it. Jake's jaw clenched. They had marked her, tracked her like a hunted animal, and now they were circling. He rushed back to the shelter. Laika was awake now, leaning against a stone, breathing heavily. They were close, Jake said. Very close. She didn't look surprised. They follow scent. They wait. They play with prey. Jake gritted his teeth. Not this time. He packed quickly. No time for rest. He helped Laika up and tied a cloth sling to carry her on his back. She was light, but every breath she took shook her body. I slow you, she whispered. You're not slowing me, he replied. You're why I'm moving faster. Laika blinked, confused. No one had ever said that to her before. As Jake moved through the trees, Laika whispered something else. They are not hunters because they need food. They hunt for joy. For screams. Jake's hands tightened on the straps. How many are there? Laika's voice was barely a whisper now. Too many. The jungle opened into a shallow valley filled with thick mud and fallen trees. It was slow to cross, but Jake had no choice. He stepped in carefully. Each step sank deep into the muck. Laika's head rested on his shoulder, her breathing shallow. This is the grave place. Jake stopped. What? She raised her hand slowly and pointed. Look. Jake turned his head. There, half buried in the mud, were bones. Not animal bones. Not human. Alien bones. Dozens. Maybe more. Skulls cracked open. Limbs broken. Some bodies still had bits of cloth on them. Old uniforms. Torn jewelry. Bracelets. Laika looked away, tears in her eyes. They brought us here, one by one. Jake swallowed hard. This wasn't a hunting ground. It was a feeding ground, and they were walking straight into the middle of it. Suddenly, Jake's foot hit something hard, in the mud. He reached down and pulled it out. It was a broken spear with a metal tag attached. The tag read, Sector 9 Survey Team, lost, 3 years ago. They've been doing this for years, Jake muttered. Laika didn't respond. Her eyes were closing again. She was losing strength. He looked around for shelter and spotted a half-buried pod under thick vines. It was from a crashed ship. Jake moved quickly, tearing the vines open. Inside, the pod was crushed but dry. He laid Laika inside and sealed the top as best as he could. Then he stood guard outside, scanning the tree line. That's when he heard it. Crunch. A soft, slow step. Then another. Jake turned and saw them. 3 figures, tall and thin, wrapped in dark armor made of bones and bark. Their faces were hidden under skull masks. Each held a long, sharp weapon. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. They had found their prey. And now they had found the human. 2. The jungle watches. The hunters didn't move fast. They didn't have to. Jake stood in front of the broken pod, knife in one hand, blaster in the other. The jungle around him was wet and heavy with fog. The rain had stopped, but the silence had returned, sharp, cutting, waiting. 3 tall hunters stepped out from the trees. They wore cloaks made from dried skin and bones. Their weapons were long and curved like hooked spears. Their faces stayed hidden behind carved skull masks. Jake raised his weapon. 1 step closer and you'll regret it. No reply. Just a slow step forward. Behind him, inside the crushed pod, Laika lay hidden, unconscious again. He could hear her shallow breathing. She wouldn't survive another move. She needed time. He had to buy it. Jake took a deep breath. Then, he ran. Straight at them. The first hunter raised his spear, but Jake was faster. He rolled under the swing and slashed upward with his knife, cutting deep into the hunter's leg. The creature growled, its mask cracking slightly. The second lunged. Jake fired his blaster. Boom! A flash of light tore through the air, burning. The jungle wall behind the hunter's head as it barely missed. Jake wasn't fast enough to dodge the third. A sharp hit knocked him to the ground. His weapon flew from his hand. Mud splashed. Blood mixed with rainwater. Jake gasped. Wind knocked from his lungs. The hunter stood over him, spear raised. Then suddenly, the jungle screamed. Not the hunters. Not Jake. The jungle. A massive roar echoed through the trees. Leaves shook. Birds flew up into the sky. The hunters froze. Something was coming. Something big. Jake rolled to the side just as a shadow fell across the clearing. Out of the trees came a beast, taller than the hunters, covered in black fur and thick armor-like scales. Its eyes glowed yellow. Its mouth held rows of sharp teeth. The hunters turned their attention to the creature. It wasn't on their side. The beast roared again and charged. One of the hunters was slammed into a tree so hard the bark cracked. The second tried to strike it with a spear, but the beast bit through the weapon like paper. Jake crawled backward, blood dripping from his mouth. He grabbed a rock and threw it at the pod. Clang from inside, Laika's eyes fluttered open. She heard the chaos. She felt the danger. And something inside her woke up. Outside, Jake struggled to stand. His vision blurred, but he saw the third hunter run straight for him. Suddenly, light burst from the pod. White, pure, blinding. The hunter stopped mid-step. Laika stepped out of the pod, glowing. Her wounds were still there, but her body was floating slightly above the ground. Her hair, lifted in the air as if held by wind. Her eyes, bright silver, locked onto the hunter's. She raised her hand. The jungle listened. Vines shot from the trees. Roots rose from the ground. The hunters tried to run, but nature itself wrapped around their legs, pulling them down. The beast stepped back, sensing her power. Jake watched, stunned. Laika looked at him. "You protected me," he nodded, breathing hard. "Still am." She floated to his side and raised both hands. Light poured from her palms, falling over Jake's wounds. His bleeding slowed. His pain faded. His vision cleared. "What are you?" he asked. "Laika," she said. "Last of the forest-born." She turned to the struggling hunters. "And I'm done running." The vines pulled tighter. The hunters let out choked, angry cries before vanishing into the ground below, swallowed by roots and mud. Silence again. But this time, not fearful, peaceful. Jake looked at the glowing jungle and realized it wasn't watching anymore. It was protecting them. One man against the pack. The jungle was alive now. Not wild, not random. Alive, with purpose. Jake walked beside Laika through a narrow path lit by glowing plants. Her feet barely touched the ground. She was weak again, but the power that had burst from her moments ago still shimmered around her like faint silver mist. "The forest listens to you," Jake said, watching the vines gently clear the path for them. Laika nodded. "I was born from it, connected to it. But I forgot, until you reminded me." "Reminded you how?" Jake asked. She turned to him with soft eyes. "You stayed." Jake didn't know how to answer that. They were walking toward a nearby cliffside. Laika said there was an ancient shrine hidden there, something built by her people long ago. It could hide them, heal her, but Jake knew it wouldn't be that easy. The jungle had stopped 3 hunters, but the rest of the pack would come, and this time they wouldn't hunt quietly. As they reached the foot of the cliff, Jake scanned the area. It was quiet, too quiet again. He helped Laika sit near the rocky wall. Suddenly she clutched her chest. "They're calling others," she whispered. "More are coming, many more." Jake looked around. "How many?" Laika closed her eyes. "At least a dozen, maybe more, and one of them is not like the rest." Jake's heart sank. "A leader?" She nodded. "They call him the Bone Mouth. He doesn't hunt for joy. He hunts for silence. He ends bloodlines." Jake checked his weapons. Only one energy cell left in the blaster. Knife was still sharp, but it wouldn't be enough. Not against 12 trained killers in their home turf. Still, he wasn't going to leave her. He kissed the top of her head. "Stay hidden. I'll handle them." Laika's eyes widened. "You can't fight all of them." Jake gave a tired smile. "Don't have to win, just have to slow them down." He set traps quickly. Vines tied to falling logs. Spiked roots under leaves. a broken beacon reprogrammed to give off false signals. And then he stood in the middle of the path, waiting. Rain began to fall again, and with it came the shadows. 12 tall hunters, masks sharper now, bodies painted in war colors. Each carried a blade or spear that seemed to drip with poison, and behind them walked him, the Bone Mouth. He was taller than the others. His mask was made from many skulls fused together. His chest was covered in jagged bones, some still fresh with flesh. Jake pointed his blaster. "You want her? You come through me." The Bone Mouth stopped, then laughed, a deep, horrible sound. Jake fired. The first shot hit a hunter in the leg. He fell screaming. Another stepped forward. Jake threw a spike trap at his face. A scream. More blood. But they kept coming. Jake dodged left, slicing one's leg with his knife. He was fast. Too fast for a human. For a moment it seemed like Jake was a ghost, hitting, moving, disappearing. But they were too many. One grabbed his arm. Another kicked his side. A third slashed across his back. Jake dropped to one knee, breathing heavy. Vision blurry. But he stood up again. His voice shook, but was clear. "Still here." The Bone Mouth stepped forward, lifted his jagged blade. And then the trees screamed again. But it wasn't Laika this time. It was the jungle. Roots tore from me. The ground. Branches whipped through the air. The forest itself fought back. The hunters screamed as they were dragged into the soil, slammed into trees, crushed under stone. Only the Bone Mouth remained. He raised his blade just as a vine wrapped around his neck, and from behind him, Laika walked forward, eyes glowing bright, skin shining like fireflies. She didn't run this time. She spoke one word. "Enough." The jungle obeyed. The Bone Mouth vanished under the roots. Silence returned. Jake dropped to the ground. Laika ran to him. Her hands shook as she healed his wounds again, crying softly. "You fought them, all of them," she whispered. Jake opened one eye, smiled weakly. "Told you, I don't run." She touched his face gently. "You didn't just protect me. You woke the jungle. You reminded it that we are not weak." Jake reached for her hand. "Then let's finish this, together." Escape or end? The jungle was quiet again, but this time, it was a different kind of quiet. No fear, no hunters, no traps. Just wind blowing softly through the leaves and the sound of birds returning to the trees. Jake sat on a flat rock beside the cliff, his shirt torn, his body covered in bruises. But he was alive, breathing, watching the forest glow under the rising twin suns. Beside him stood Laika, not hiding, not weak, standing tall. Her silver-blue skin shimmered gently. Her hair moved in the wind. Her eyes, once full of pain, now held strength and peace. Jake turned to her. "Are they all gone?" Laika nodded. "The Bone Mouth was the last. The forest remembers now. It won't let them return." Jake looked out across the jungle. "It feels different, like it's alive." Laika smiled softly. "It always was, but it forgot how to protect. Too much pain, too much blood. Your voice, your fight, reminded it." He chuckled. "All I did was survive." "No," she whispered. "You stayed. You didn't walk away." Jake looked at her carefully. "So what happens now?" Laika walked a few steps forward, her feet touching moss that opened like a blooming flower beneath her. "There's a ship," she said, "hidden far in the east. My people left it for emergencies. I thought I'd never reach it." Jake stood slowly. "Then let's get you to it. Get you out of here." She turned to him. "Us. Get us out of here." He froze. "Laika." But she walked to him, close enough that he could see the faint green lines glowing under her skin. "I don't want to leave this planet alone, not anymore." Jake swallowed. You sure? I'm just a man who got lost in a jungle. She smiled. Exactly the kind of man the galaxy needs more of. Their journey to the ship took 3 days. The jungle opened for them. Animals followed quietly but didn't attack. Trees bent gently, aside as if honoring Leica's return. At night, Jake and Leica sat beside warm fires telling stories, some with words, others with gestures. They shared laughs, food, and quiet moments. The bond between them grew stronger each hour. On the final day, they reached a moss-covered hill. Beneath it, half buried, was a sleek silver escape ship, old but still alive. Leica placed her hand on the scanner. The ship opened for her like it had been waiting. They stepped inside. Lights turned on. The soft hum of power filled the air. Jake looked around. It still works? Leica nodded. It remembers. She sat at the control panel. We can go anywhere. Jake stared at the stars visible through the open hatch. And if I said, I don't want to go back to Earth? Leica smiled, eyes glowing. Then we find a new home. Together. Jake looked at her one last time. This alien girl who had been hunted like a beast and stood like a queen. He nodded. Let's go. As the ship rose into the sky, the jungle below shimmered with green light. Roots waved like arms. The birds sang. And far, far away, hidden eyes watched the ship fly. This time, not with fear or anger, but with hope. The forest had lost many, but it had also witnessed something rare. Kindness. Loyalty. A man who heard a scream and answered it. In a galaxy full of monsters sometimes, all it takes to change everything is one man who doesn't turn away.